Do you ever notice how some people are they seem to be able to figure more things out than the average person? They seem like, I don't want to call it genius, but they seem to have arrived in a place that most people haven't arrived at, whether that's they've figured things out with money, whether that's they've figured things out with relationships, whether that's they've figured things out with um, living and enjoying life in a way that most people don't seem to have done. I've noticed this about other people. Sometimes people, I'm sure, think that about me. Certainly not all the time. But I've noticed that there are certain people who have a certain set of qualities who seem to be bound to figure things out. And I want to spend some time talking about that today, in part because as I wake up on this slow Sunday morning, I am finding myself kind of overwhelmed with thoughts related to things that I haven't figured out yet. And I sat down before this talk and I thought, well, surely I'm not the only one that's struggling with that at any given moment in time. And surely a lot of people will end up back in a place where they're like, how are there so many things I haven't figured out yet? For me this morning, the stories were related to aches and pains that I haven't figured out how to get rid of yet or heal. The kind of food that I want to be eating more of, I haven't figured out how to do that on a regular basis yet. The relationships I want to have, the friendships I want to have, the kind of lifestyle, I haven't figured out everything about what I want yet. I haven't figured out how to activate it. I have an idea in mind, but there's a lot of pieces that I haven't figured out. Financially, I haven't figured most things out. I mean, I figured out how to spend within my means, I think. That took some time, how to not live on debt. But there's a lot of things I haven't figured out. And it was really foremost. That's not my usual experience. My usual experience, or at least most of the time, I'm not concerned about those things. So in this video, I'm going to talk through those things from the perspective of as if I were talking to a friend, which is the practice I try to use with myself when I find myself in a place alone and wanting to find some sense of resolution. Is what advice would I give a friend? People who seem to have things figured out. Number one, I think it's an illusion that people have everything figured out. I think there are two identities you can claim in any given moment. You can claim the identity of the person who never figures anything out, or you can claim the identity of the person who figures things out. Not the person who has things figured out, but you claim the identity of the person who figures things out. An example I'll share with this is when it comes to music. I can get stuck in my head thinking that that I don't know enough musically to be the kind of musician that I want to be in the world, to perform with the kind of musicians that I want to perform with. And what I have noticed, however, is that I can't remember the last time I sat down to learn a song and not figured out an arrangement of that song that satisfies the part of me that wants to be able to arrange that song. I can't think of the last time I started to develop a technique on the guitar and didn't eventually figure it out. Similarly with writing, I sit down and I write most mornings, right, this side. I sit down and write most mornings, and while there are things that I'm still in the process of figuring out how to articulate, because I'm identified as a writer, because I identify as a writer, it always seems to be the case that when I put my mind to figuring out how to articulate something, I end up figuring it out. And that's the takeaway I want. So I guess point number one is the people who seem to have things all figured out aren't actually people who have things all figured out. They're people who tend to excel at figuring things out, but that doesn't leave them in a landed state, in a state of arrival, of having everything figured out. Number two, we can adopt any of those identities at any time that says, I'm a person who figures things out. Because if you're a person who figures things out, you don't have to have it figured out. The evidence you're looking for, the proof that you might want for yourself that you've actually done the job of living up to the identity you've described. You don't have to complete the process ever. You can just be someone who is figuring it out. And if you adopt that identity, you will have a year from now, a week from now, a day from now, you will have figured more things out than the version of you that adopts the identity of, I am someone who doesn't have things figured out. Nobody has things figured out. You are someone who figures things out. Maybe that's it.